Now, you may be sitting there asking yourself, what is the point of all this, creating all these crazy vector lines? Well, let me show you this. I'm going to go up to my window menu way up at the top, and I'm going to head all the way down to paths. I actually have a paths palette here inside Photoshop, and the paths palette has been tracking everything that I've been doing inside my artwork here inside Photoshop. So this guy's going to save and store my paths as I go. So let me give you a practical example of where you would use the pen tool and paths and also the paths panel. So I'm going to go and open up another document here. Inside the Chapter 10 folder, I'm going to open up trucks.psd. And what I've decided to do is I want to try and select this blue truck on the right-hand side using the pen tool and using a lot of the techniques that we just learned about, and I'll throw in a few others for you as well. So I'm going to zoom in on this guy, and this is going to be a great example of using the pen tool to select objects here inside Photoshop. So I'll get this guy nice and big on my screen. I've got my pen tool selected. I have the options bar here up at the top. I have him set to paths. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start clicking a path around my object. This is called close cropping here inside Photoshop. It's a method or a technique for yanking objects off of their background. So far what I've done here is I've just sort of single clicked around the back of the bumper here, and then I find myself up towards the top back corner, and I'm going to click and drag to match that curve there. Obviously what I'm trying to do here is get my path sitting right on the edge of this object. There, I get these direction lines here. Now this gives me an opportunity to show you these direction lines in greater detail. I'm going to hold down the Command key here, Control on the Windows side. Of course, that toggles me to the white arrow tool. And this is what I meant earlier about the whole teeter-totter idea. So if I drag the direction line in one direction, the curve bows out. If I drag it in another direction, the curve bows in. That's the idea here. And of course, I'm dragging right on the end of the direction line, these little dots here that appear. And the other thing that I could do too is I could pull this line out or pull him in, again, to control that curve. Again, it's one of those things that's going to take practice. And to be honest, the pen tool, for me anyway, it's really more about feel. You can't really watch someone do it. You really have to use it on your own. So I'm going to bring my cursor over top of this anchor point here. I will Option click or Alt click on the Windows side. Of course, that breaks away that one direction line, and I will continue clicking around my Jeep here. Is it a Jeep? I think it's a Jeep. Something like this. Option click. All the way around here. Now, I'm a little bit off there, so I can always grab my white arrow tool just by holding down Command or Control and repositioning that anchor point. Paths are always editable, even after you've completed them. You can always go back to your Command or your Control and adjust your paths and anchor points and so on. Work my way around here. It's a little bit tedious. Now I find it's one of those things, again, it's on autopilot. I don't even really think about it. I just kind of do it. I do a lot of option clicking or alt clicking with my anchor points here. Whenever you stop and you go back and you adjust something previous on your path, like I'm doing here, make sure to always single click back on your last anchor point before you continue. All right, I'm not going to bother going around the ridges of the tires here. I suppose if this were a pro job, I would do a much better job of laying out my path here. Something like this. Almost done here. Almost done. Around the back tire. I'm using my space bar there just to pan around inside my image. Around the rear tire. Crank this guy way out. You get a feel as well for where your anchor points should go. Now, this is something interesting. I'm glad this has happened. See how I goofed up right here? Well, I need to add in an extra anchor point. And you'll notice there that when I bring my cursor over top of a path, I get a plus sign appearing beside my pen tool. That's the same as choosing the Add Anchor Point tool from the toolbox here. So what I'm going to do instead of grabbing that tool is I'm just going to single click on my path. That adds in a new anchor point. I'll hold down Command or, of course, Control, position that guy in. Click on the end of the path and continue on my merry way. So whenever you bring your cursor over top of your path, you'll get that plus sign appearing where you can add in an anchor point. Here I'm finishing off my path. There's the donut beside my pen nib. I'll single click. And I should mention as well that if I bring my cursor over top of an existing anchor point, I'm going to command click on this path here so you can see what I'm talking about. If I hover over top of an existing anchor point, I get a little minus beside my pen nib, which would allow me to remove an anchor point if I wanted to. Okay, so there's my completed truck there. Inside the Paths panel, you can see that it has saved my path there. I want to make sure that it's really saved for sure, though. So I'm going to head up to the Paths palette menu and across to Save Path. And I'm going to call this Blue Truck. There it is there. Now, if I wanted to use this file inside a print document, maybe I'm going to drop this file into Quark Express or InDesign, I can get those programs to recognize this clipping path so long as I convert the path to a clipping path inside the Paths palette. How do you do it? Well, first of all, make sure you've saved your path, which we just did. Go back up to the Paths palette menu, and go down to Clipping Path. The clipping path that I want to save is my blue truck path. I'll click on OK, and you can see what happens inside the path palette there. The letters inside the paths palette indicate that I've just saved my path as a clipping path. So I could save this out, import it into InDesign or Quark, and the path would actually be recognized. Maybe I want to wrap some text around the contour of this path, that sort of thing. What else can I do with this path? Well, down at the bottom, I could fill the path if I wanted to. I could stroke the path. In other words, I could create an outline all the way around if I wanted to. Or I could convert the path to a selection. So there's my marching ants right there. I'm going to zoom all the way out here. I'll head up to my layer menu, down to New, and then Layer via Copy. I'll pop open my Layers palette. There's my new truck sitting isolated all by himself there. As a matter of fact, I'll take my background layer here. I will fill him with white by using Command Delete or Control Delete. And I'll finish this off by hitting the C key on my keyboard to grab my crop tool. And I'll crop this guy down. All right, so there's a practical example of using the pen tool inside Photoshop.